Welcome to This Week in South Carolina. I'm Gavin Jackson. Next week marks the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. And to commemorate, PBS debuted the special series Chasing the Moon. We continue with our coverage of the summer of space by looking at the aerospace industry, an industry in recent years that has seen significant growth, making South Carolina one of the top states in the country for building aircraft. South Carolina is home to a $19 billion aerospace industry that will soon rival the automotive industry in the state in terms of economic output. The industry is home to more than 20,000 jobs and more than 400 firms, including Boeing and Lockheed Martin. Boeing's North Charleston 787 plant, which broke ground in 2009, has revolutionized the aerospace industry in South Carolina. It spent $1.75 billion in the state and has created billions of dollars in economic output. Export sales of aircraft from South Carolina have risen from $80 million in 2010 to nearly $8 billion last year. Aircraft exports will also see a bump thanks to the new F-16 production line that is relocating to Greenville. Lockheed Martin held a ribbon-cutting ceremony earlier this year for the production line that will create 400 new employees who will build the fighter plane for American allies. Senator Lindsey Graham was one of those present.
And the F-16 built in Greenville is the most advanced F-16 in the inventory. It will be sold to allies throughout the world, and it's going to make us safer back here at home. And it's a compliment to the South Carolina workforce. I want to thank Lockheed, but this small state, South Carolina, is building 787s for Boeing that will go all over the world, and now the F-16 that will go all over the world to protect America.
The aerospace industry is poised to continue growing in the state with a growing network of suppliers and educational opportunities to feed the pipeline of talent and high-paying jobs for the industry. Joining us to discuss South Carolina's aerospace industry is Susie Shannon, President and CEO of the South Carolina Council of Competitiveness, and Carl Washburn, Director of the Aircraft Maintenance Technology Program at Greenville Technical College. Thank you both for being here. This is great.
Thank you. Happy
Susie,
to be here.
I want to start with you. Talk to us about the economic impact of aerospace in South Carolina, what it does for our economy.
Well, Gavin, it has a huge impact on our economy. We really refer to aerospace as one of our rock star industry clusters, economic engines operating in the state today. Every other year, we commission and release an economic impact study in order to quantify exactly the substantial impact that aerospace has on our state's economy. And so we did that last year, previewed it at our aerospace conference here in Columbia last fall. And so we were looking at a nearly $25 billion impact on the state and about a little over 14 billion contribution to our state's GDP. So, we've got about 55,000 aerospace jobs here in South Carolina in the private sector employment side. And because we do break it down by military aerospace and civilian aerospace, but our civilian aerospace is soaring pretty high right now. We always like to say that South Carolina is just right for aerospace. And one interesting phenomenon too is when you look at the number of companies, we've got more than 400 aerospace related firms currently in South Carolina with some base of operations in South Carolina. Most people think of North Charleston, and obviously they should. There's a lot of aerospace economic activity going on in the Low Country arena, and certainly the higher numbers of employment are concentrated in that region. However, when you look across the state at the swath of our three major regions, the upstate, the Midlands, and the Low Country, then those numbers of firms are pretty much evenly distributed across the state. So you do see quite a bit of aerospace activity going on, not just in the upstate, not just in the Low Country, but also right here in the Midlands.
So a true aerospace state, not just one sector or another of the state.
Absolutely true.
Well, we're looking at the revenue growth. We were just talking about that. It seems, I think we're doing like 25% annual revenue growth there. So is that sustainable? How do we sustain that growth rate in South Carolina?
Well, we're seeing more opportunities around the aerospace arena, whether it's around space opportunities, not just military space, but also commercial space opportunities. We're also seeing a higher growth in our supply chain coming into South Carolina as well as expanding inside of South Carolina. We see overlap with other industry activity going on. For instance, our supply chain is robust not just to support the aerospace industry, but also to support our automotive industry, which, as we all know, is very robust in South Carolina today. And so we actually do think we're going to see more growth in that area.
Gotcha. Carl, kind of talking about education here, and we will expand more upon it eventually, but I want to just ask you a little bit about, I think the annual growth is 15% for employees in the aerospace industry. Talk about how we fuel that pipeline and how we continue to get that growth for these jobs that are clearly here to stay.
Well, as Susie mentioned, we have in the low state, in the center, in the upstate, we have 3 FAA Part 147 schools in the state of South Carolina. I'm responsible for the one up in Greenville, South Carolina. We've just recently got a new facility, tripled in size. To give you an idea how big it is, the platform, the footprint is the size of a football field, so you figure it's huge. It's tripled what we had. We've expanded our enrollment. We were licensed for 120 students. The FAA has allowed us to bump it up to 200 students. It allows us to train a lot more students. As we know, in the next couple of years, there'll be more people retiring from the aviation industry than we can handle. So we're up in the growth. We're up in the size of the program. We're offering the program to high school students, so 11th and 12th graders in Greenville County can actually come to our program and actually get a third of the training done. Lockheed, as we know, is starting to build the F-16, so that's having a draw on us. There's local aviation industry in the state that's actually drawing students. We're having a higher placement of graduates than we've ever had. The companies are actually coming and pre-hiring students, offering them signing bonuses before they actually complete the program.
So there's definitely a draw for it. There's definitely a need for it, and you guys are helping meet that. So you said up in Greenville Tech, there's the Science, Technology, Aviation Center is what you guys are talking about?
Yes, it's at SCTech, South Carolina Aviation and Technology Center. We have a brand new campus up there, just starting our second year of using the facility. Expanded from 120 students to 200. We share it with the South Carolina Army National Guard, and we're actually working a partnership with them to help train their helicopter technicians and bring them over to teach them, to get them their FAA certification as well. Because the Lakota helicopter they're flying, in order to maintain that helicopter, they have to be certified technicians.
And there are 2 other places in the state that are doing similar activities.
There are a total of 3 schools in the state. We have Trident Tech down in Charleston, PIA is in Myrtle Beach, and then we're up in Greenville.
So we're obviously helping supply a good pipeline of kids who are STEM proficient and know what's going on, especially with the aerospace industry. But we also see a lot of people coming from out of state for some of these jobs too. Is that a problem, Susie, when we see some of these maybe higher paying jobs, even though some of these jobs are already pretty higher paying? Is there a way to try and maybe prevent that from happening?
Well, we can, and we're working on that. And so Carl mentioned about the sign-on bonuses and the compensation that's being offered. One of the things that we've found is the aerospace-related jobs bring with it higher paying salaries. So it's a big recruitment incentive. We're looking at nearly $80,000 average total compensation annually for these aerospace employees, and so certainly that's going to be a big draw. And as far as continuing to feed the pipeline, we rolled out a couple of years ago in partnership with the South Carolina Department of Education an aerospace engineering dedicated curriculum in the high schools. We've started out in 6 schools. We've now gone into 7 schools. And we're already seeing some of those students matriculate through that 2-year track and scoring in the top percentile on that assessment compared to other student takers across the country. So we had the 2 top scores last year. In the nation. We also had one of the schools, Emerald in Greenwood, the entire class scored in the top nationally. So we're already seeing some really aggressive momentum inside of the K through 12 pipeline, so that when they get to Carl, they're already going to have a really good foundation already established to help them succeed and excel in those career tracks. So we're excited about that.
We can definitely jump more into education in a moment. I want to talk about the recent trip to the Paris Air Show. South Carolina sent a contingent of folks over there. Someone from your office went. Susie, I want to see, did we get anywhere? Did we get any progress on these? I know it's a lot of money. A lot of people see being spent on these kind of trips, but is it worth it for taxpayers to fund these trips? What's the outcome of these trips?
The outcomes are successful, right? So we have to invest a little bit of money in order to have that return on investment down the road. When you look at the Team SC contingent that travels over and begins to have really close-in conversations with not just prospective companies that can be recruited into the state, but also the existing partner companies that are already sited here or are close to being sited here, and you can really have that close-in time, be exposed to what's going on across the world. We know with respect to our South Carolina companies that they're not just doing business in South Carolina or just in the Southeast, they're doing business all over the world. So naturally that's going to take a more sort of aggressive global approach, and Team SC I think has been very successful in coming back with really successful results for our state.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably a boost of confidence too when you see that Korean Air's inking a deal for 10 77-10s and 10 other -9s, which are assembled in North Charleston. So does South Carolina have any role in when it comes to making those deals, or is that just strictly Boeing and an airliner working out through those details and you being there for support in some ways, maybe?
Well, first of all, just to clarify our role in all of this, so we're not an economic development recruitment agency. We like to say that the economic developers, like Department of Commerce, like the Regional Economic Development Alliances, like the local government economic development offices, help to recruit them here, and then we give them a soft place to land, right, by having this existing infrastructure and framework to embrace them and help support their ongoing needs, whether it's workforce development, whether it's R&D, or just building peer network relationships around the state.
Gotcha. So I kind of want to get an idea, I guess, maybe as we talk about Boeing, just how much Boeing has changed the landscape in South Carolina since they've really started ramping up their production of the facility in 2011, 2012-ish. Just, Carl, just for your background, tell me like what the pipeline has been looking like, what the education landscape has looked like since Boeing has ramped up, and how you guys maybe supply them and how other schools across the state do as well.
Just hearing the name Boeing, I think, has helped significantly in enrollment. Since Boeing has opened up operation in Charleston, our enrollment has increased. Students, just the word of aviation, the fact that we know that there's going to be good jobs out there, that these graduates are going to go ahead and find good work. So it started with Boeing, and then obviously Boeing has brought a lot of other companies into South Carolina to help support that Dreamliner production.
Mm-hmm. And then what is your take on how Boeing has changed the landscape of South Carolina from an economic development and other perspective when it comes to other suppliers relocating here? Is it having that BMW effect yet, or is it already taken foot?
I think it's taken foot. And I think once these companies come in and they see the other opportunities in other industry sectors, like automotive, like other advanced manufacturing related concerns, they're seeing other potential opportunities. I mean, not only is South Carolina now, building automobiles, but we're building commercial airplanes, but like Carl mentioned, Lockheed Martin and the F-16 production that will be coming online fairly soon. We're now building military related aircraft. So we're hitting all three of those marks, and it's an exciting day.
And Susie, you brought up automotive, and before we get more to Boeing, I want to see how much overlap is there when we look at, what the automotive industry is like in South Carolina versus the aerospace industry. Is there much overlap? How do the two work together in some ways?
We see some overlap, particularly maybe in the workforce arena and some of the composite materials that are used to build a car as well as build a plane. Certainly there's a little bit more involved in certain mission critical pieces, components of an airplane when constructing an airplane, assembling an airplane. There may be more enhanced certification requirements or standards, but a lot of the foundational skills and mid-level skills I think are very similar, and Carl probably would have more of a educated take on that piece, but we do see a lot of overlap, and you do see some crossover. For instance, moving from the workforce moving from one industry to the other, and being able to find some compatibility.
Yeah, Carl, what's it like in the education arena?
We do get a lot of students that cross over from automotive and move on into aviation. Because of the requirement that's established by the FAA, they still need to go through all the aviation courses. There's a requirement. They get almost 2,000 hours of classroom and lecture and hands-on training to get their FAA certification. Or even the military, we get folks out of Shaw Air Force Base and places like that that have 30 months experience in aviation, and they can come up and they can take their FAA exams. They're not necessarily ready. They understand the theory of operation, they understand how everything works, but the lingo that we use in commercial aviation and civilian aviation is different than what we used to use in the military. So a lot of it's just learning the terminology. We'll ask them specific questions, and they don't know the answer because they don't understand the question. But once they learn the lingo, they typically don't have any issues at all when it comes to getting their FAA certification. And when we talk about the Lockheeds, one of the big things that I see the difference between aviation and automotive is these aviation companies are paying for some of these students to come back and get their associate degree. They're paying for them to get their bachelor's degree and a master's degree. So they come to Greenville Tech, they get their associate degree, they get their FAA certification, and then they go to the Lockheeds and they go to the Boeings and companies like that. And these companies are paying for them to actually get their bachelor's degree and their master's degree. So here they're getting hands-on experience and they're getting an education for free. And they're really accelerating. Some of these guys are bringing home some big money.
And Carl, you were also telling me about how some of these aircraft technician students go off and have, like we said, already got that money in hand, a lot of signing bonuses, but also have really their pick of the litter when it comes to some of these airline companies to go work for as well.
The companies are coming right into tech, and they're pre-hiring our students. Last year at Easter time, we had one of the local aviation companies in Greenville came in. They're a regional carrier for American, and they pre-hired 6 students, and they told the rest of the class, if you want to work for us, we'll find you a job. We'll pre-hire these 6 to work in Greenville, and they offered them a $20 an hour starting out wage. And about 3 weeks ago, they came back and said, we're going to up your starting wage from $20 to $25 an hour. They know that within the next 2 to 3 years, there's going to be such a shortage of technicians. They got to get them now.
Mm-hmm. And then switching back to Boeing a little bit, have we seen any ramifications from the trade war, the ongoing trade war, Susie, that have rippled to Boeing or to South Carolina at this point, like in the aerospace industry specifically, or any?
Well, I think that there's probably a desire across the spectrum in South Carolina to see some resolution to what's going on inside of the trade discussions. And so I think the sooner that's resolved, the sooner we'll all be more happy about it.
Mm-hmm. And one benefit, obviously, we're seeing from some foreign trade is the F-16 program coming to Greenville for Lockheed Martin. Mm-hmm. Carl, you were up there. I was up there for that ribbon cutting earlier this year. 400 new jobs. Those aren't jobs coming from Texas where the line is going to be shifting from. It's going to be 400 jobs in South Carolina. So I'm guessing we're ready for those jobs at this point, or we're gearing up for those jobs?
We are. We're training technicians. We're working hand in hand with the folks at Lockheed, even as we speak, developing training programs so that we can prepare our students and prepare future students so they're ready to walk right into those jobs and actually be functional to keep that F-16 line moving forward safely.
How big of a get was that, Susie, to see that whole production line kind of come to Greenville and have that an area that was always been looking for a big line, a big production line, but to have something like this kind of move up there and really boost the upstate's presence?
No, I think this was significant. Lockheed Martin actually has a long-established presence in South Carolina. I think that kind of gets maybe lost sometimes as other companies, come in. Mm-hmm. They've been really strong on the maintenance, repair, overhaul, MRO side of business, and so they've been planted in Beaufort, planted in Greenville actually for quite some time, decades. Yeah. So I think having this new line come on is going to be a big boom, not just to the region, but to the entire state. Mm-hmm. And like I said, when we've got automobiles, when we've got commercial aircraft, and we've got military aircraft, and then the entire supply chain and spectrum that comes along with that, it's going to have a huge economic impact.
And then we also look at the military impact of aviation, of aerospace in South Carolina. Carl, you were in the Air Force for years, worked at Shaw, worked on these F-16s. What's it going to be like to have that production line? Obviously, they're fueling production orders for our allies overseas. We'll be taking the F-35 for delivery for all these other branches of the U.S. Military. But what's it going to be like, at least, to have that kind of production, that kind of expertise in South Carolina when you do have Shaw Air Force still flying these F-16s?
I think it's a good thing. Obviously it's a later version than what we were flying at Shaw. These are going to be Block 60s, but it's good to have that tech. You know, now we've got the expertise up here. We're actually assembling these airplanes. Don't know if there'll be any communication between the Lockheed here and the Shaw group or not, but it's pretty fantastic to sit there and to be able to walk out and from our office be able to watch the F-16s take off and land. It's gonna bring back memories of what it was like.
Mm-hmm. And so, what more do we need to do to kind of create this pipeline of high-tech manufacturing jobs, Susie? You know, we've seen reports in the Post-Inquirer had that minimally adequate series out, and they looked at how, I think, 22 school districts in the state had more students who aren't career ready than the ones who are. Are we doing enough to really get into the schools and to get through, you know, maybe it's the high schools or the K through 12 pipeline to really get kids motivated about STEM? I mean, I know a lot of these school districts are along the corridor of shame, and there's a lot of difficulties in those areas, and we have seen the State House and lawmakers try and kind of break down this wall and try and get through some more reforms this year. But what do you see needing to be done? Is it a better partnership with business, or are we doing enough for that partnership? We just need more from Columbia?
Well, I think building coalitions of partnerships should always be on the table. I think workforce and education is an evergreen issue, which means it's never going to go away. And actually, always having that challenge is somewhat positive, because that means we're growing, and we're also diversifying our economy as well. If you think about where we were just 30 years ago in our economy and the limited number of industry concerns that we were addressing. The legislature this past year allocated some significant funds to both Department of Commerce and South Carolina Department of Education to address some of the challenges within the rural areas. And that also incentivizes the adjacent rural areas and school districts to also maybe make some headway on some projects and infrastructure related projects there. So I think we're going to see we're already seeing some dedicated attention in those areas and in those schools, and it is, I think, more of a priority with the state right now, and that's very heartening to see. And I think the business community sits up and takes notice when those types of proactive, hard steps are being made, and coming to the table and seeing how the business community can help and support what the policymakers are doing.
And Carl, you see some of that in your students too that you've had at Greenville Tech. How do you guys address these students, both maybe in the automotive aspect and also aviation, since there is so much overlap, when you have people like Michelin and BMW saying, hey, some of these students can't pass our math tests to work for us? How do you make sure that they come out of Greenville Tech prepared?
As they start the program, they have their entrance exam, so we have an idea what their math level is and what their English and their speech levels and stuff are. And they have to be at a certain level before we even let them start taking our courses. So there's developmental courses we can put them in developmental math or developmental English. But I can tell you for the aviation department, very, very few of our students actually have to start in a developmental. Most of them are able to go ahead and pick right up and get the math they need. They can certainly get the math level we're teaching and the physics that we're teaching in our program without too much difficulty. Every now and again, we'll get one and we kind of look and we'll catch them before they get there, and we'll send them off and get some developmental. It slows their whole process down a little bit, but in the end, we end up with a better student. And more often than not, they'll come back to me, or their parents will come back and say, hey, we're glad you told him or her this, because we knew they weren't ready, but they weren't listening to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So still a lot of work to be done, but
there is, but it's very few. It's not the numbers you would think. The vast majority of our students come right through our program. They finish our program and go right on and pursue their associate degree, and they go right out in the workforce. And all the employers that I'm talking to that are getting our graduates are very happy with what they're seeing.
And you said you have been having more students come through the program. Is the word getting out that STEM is cool? STEM needs to be where you want to, get a nice, strong, reliable job that pays well?
It is, yeah. And the high schoolers are really getting excited about it, and they're taking and spreading the word back in the high school. We've been doing this now. I've been at Tech since 2001, and we've been teaching high schoolers, and it's always been not cool. But here within the last year or two, since the Boeing word is out, and since now Lockheed is building the F-16, And you know, the word is out, and these students are really excited, and Lockheed's coming over, and they're talking to the students, and they're showing them a career path, and then they actually get to go tour the Lockheed facility and see where this F-16 is going to be built. And
that has a big
to see the
impact
gleam in
yeah.
their eyes and just know that, wow, there's a career for me, and I'm going to make good money. And most of these students, when they graduate are going to make more money starting out than their mom and dads are making even today. It's huge.
And Susie, with less than 2 minutes left, how do you see the aerospace industry in South Carolina growing at this point, or what does its future look like for you?
Well, that's easy. It's going to continue to soar, right? And as we do see continued diversification of our economy, we're seeing more technology firms, for instance, to come into the state or to actually grow, be incubated inside of South Carolina. Those will be a nice complement to our advanced manufacturing, including aerospace. So I think you're going to see this blossoming of sort of a kaleidoscopic architecture around aerospace to support it, which is only going to continue to exponentially grow.
How do you see aerospace going forward, Carl, here in South Carolina?
I see it taking off. I truly see it taking off. The need for technicians is only going to continue to grow. We know within the next 2 or 3 years there'll be more people retiring than we can fill in the schools we have in South Carolina, and their wages are going up. As the demand increases, the wages grow up. We already seen this just a few weeks ago, where one of the local regionals gave them a $5 an hour pay raise before they even started.
So plenty of opportunity out there and plenty of potential for us. Thank you to Susie and Carl for joining us, and we want to thank you for joining us this season on This Week in South Carolina. We're taking a summer break, but we'll be back with new episodes this fall. From the Kennedy Greenhouse Studio on the campus of the University of South Carolina, I'm Gavin Jackson.